Fellow councillors, staff and residents viewing via live stream, good morning all and welcome. I acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of the land on which this meeting is being held and pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging. Do we have any apologies? That's a no, okay. I'll move on to the declaration of conflict of interest. Declaration of prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest. Please use this opportunity to make public any prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest in respect of the items in the agenda. Councillors should use this opportunity to disclose and or comment on other councillors and or staff interests in accordance with the Act and the regulations. Are there any conflicts to declare? That's a no, okay. We'll move on to confirmation of the minutes. Would somebody move that the previous minutes are a true and accurate record, please? Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Any business arising from the minutes? Councillor Barnes.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through the chairman. First of all, I'd just like to ask Gobinda. I'm of the understanding we were very successful in our auction of our 4 properties on Saturday. Is it true we sold 3 and negotiating with the 4th? Is that correct?
Mr. Singh.
Good morning, councillors. We did have 3 properties go for auction. There was the 4th one which was withdrawn, and out of the 3 we have 2 that has been signed and 1 that we are still negotiating at the moment, but the likelihood of that said property is that it might go for the next auction, so we probably won't be able to sell it, is what I believe would happen going forward.
Thanks, Mr. Singh.
Good. Thank you very much, Gobinda. And also the next one out of last week's minutes is 4.7. at our next meeting or the meeting after, I'd like to move a motion. I'd just like to give fellow councillors a bit of warning that with our drum muster, we're the only shire in North Queensland really that aren't using our local contractor. We've got a local contractor living in our area. He's doing all the surrounding shires, but we're getting someone from Townsville. So I'd like Adam just to do a little bit of work on that and come back to us, please, Adam.
Mr. Sadler.
Through the chair, thank you, Deputy Mayor. As we've highlighted previously to council, that we do have a sniffing at waste project that we are working on. It has been identified. The timing isn't tomorrow in that regard. We are working on obviously our kick-off of day labour operations as opposed to contract services as of the end of June. So in that regard, whilst it has been identified as part of the project, the timing will be a little bit longer.
Thanks, Mr. Sadler. You happy with that, Councillor Barnes? Thank you. Any, Councillor Chewy?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just following on from the report that I presented last meeting regarding the tackle bins, we'd just like to now announce that there's 5 bins have been installed. Myself and Sharon and Steve from Mission Beach Wildcare went down to Perry Harvey Jetty to have instruction on how to empty and record the data, and Councillor Pervin, Millwood and Baines attended Innisfail. So it's a great thing for the tackle waste and cigarette butts. And thanks to Carmen, who worked very hard, and I've just got some information that she's provided about that project, which I'd just like to share. So it was funded, the whole project was funded through the federal government's Communities Environment Program, administered through Bob Catter's office. The project was paused in 2020 due to COVID. Tackle and butt bins have been installed at 5 onshore fishing hotspots along the Cassowary coast: the Innisfail Public Wharf, Dunk Island Jetty, Perry Harvey Jetty, Clump Point Boat Ramp and Cardwell Jetty. Each site has been quickly adopted by local community members that include business operators, wildlife carers and councillors. Adoptees monitor and maintain the bins. More bins will be installed in the region if this project proves successful. The total cost of the project was $8,600, and if you'd like to follow the Tackle Bin project, you can like the Friends of the Cassowary Coast Local Marine Advisory Committee Facebook page. So just well done. I think it's a great project. The bin that was only there for a short time yesterday already had things in it, so it's very exciting. I know it's been an issue on Perry Harvey Jetty for some time that people have contacted me about waste, so hopefully people will use the bin appropriately and the information can be recorded. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Councillor Millwood? No, you didn't have anything? I've got one item in business arising, item 2 on page 2, in relation to the Port Hinchinbrook dredging. I just wanted to keep councillors fully informed that the CEO prepared a draft yesterday, which I've signed off on, and we now have a new Deputy Prime Minister, and Barnaby Joyce has received the original correspondence from Michael McCormack asking for further consideration for the 1.5 million to deliver the dredging project. So just wanted you to know that the new Deputy Prime Minister now has that correspondence in his office. Any further business arising? No? We'll move on to item 3, item 3.1, page 13, Audit Committee Report, and Mr. Singh will present this report.
Councillors, good morning again.
Morning.
So, councillors, our audit committee meets every quarter, and as part of our requirement to the audit committee charter, they normally go through our operational risk and also look at our control measures. So in terms of the agenda item attached today, these are minutes from the last audit committee, which has been formally endorsed in the June meeting. So this is the March audit committee draft minutes. So councillors, without going through the minutes itself, I'm happy to take any questions before recommending that council adopt or note the minutes from the last meeting.
Any questions for Mr. Singh? Councillor Barnes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Look, Gobinder, I understand that the audit committee is all about policy, right? Now, there's a few little things in here when I was reading it, I just sort of was left in the air a little bit. if we go to, we go to number 2, like we sort of need clarification on that enterprise risk management. Like I know strategic risk is disasters, etc. So if you look at that, that's a little bit confusing to me. And then you go over the page to like 6.1, go over the page like to 6.3. It says Gobinder Singh advises the meeting that council is still working on disposals and commitments. Like we've sort of put a report here together where there's still a lot of gaps in it. And if we go to 7.1, it says like we're still finalising with council. I just get a little bit confused, that's all. Like there's a lot of work still to do on this report, and this whole report seems to have its challenges. Now, I know it's a lot of work, Gobinder, but I just got a few questions, that's all. Thank you.
So just through the chair, councillors, Councillor Barnes, just to update you, said the audit committee is just not only about compliance, so it has a charter and there's a lot of items that sits with the audit committee. In terms of the actual agenda item that the audit committee gets, the agenda item is actually broken into 2 components. So what we call is agenda item A and agenda item B. So agenda item B are generally reports that are presented to the audit committee that are there for noting. So in reference to approval of part 2 items, so generally when the audit committee chair runs the meeting, he goes to the actual report, which is around 300 pages or a bit more sometimes. So what he does is gives the members on the audit committee, so the members that are on the audit committee are 3 independent members and 2 are from council. So obviously the mayor, and in the past we've had Kylie Ferranelli, who's been on the audit committee. So what they do then is decide if there's any items in part 2 or part B of the agenda that needs to be brought forward. So this could be any report within that part of the agenda item, so that gets brought forward into part A. But if it's not, then generally the chair then recommends that the audit committee sign off on part B, which is without going through every item that's on the agenda for the day, just because they are reports that are presented, they read it, they understand it, and they sign off on it. So in relation to the first question, which is 2, approval of part B item. So that's the process we run. So that's how they endorse that process. So in relation to the other item, which is 6.3, which is our external audit issues register. So generally, as part of the audit process, council has got 2 registers that we maintain. One is our internal audit register. So where that comes from is through our internal audit process, and then what council does is tracks items that have been identified for council to address. And the other external audit register is the external audit that the QAO undertakes, and there are recommendations made. So council generally goes in and tries to implement those recommendations. So generally what you'll see in the council meeting today is our interim report that has been prepared by Grant Thornton on behalf of the Queensland Audit Office. So on that report, you'll find there are action items that council needs to address. So that particular register, that external audit issues register, which is number 6.3, is literally referring to that register. So what we do as part of our quarterly update to the audit committee is we provide them a status update on where we are with some of those action items. So going back to 6.3, so at that, in this particular case, I think what it's referring to are 2 separate items. One is council maintains a register for all our contracts, and as part of that we also look at our contractual commitments. So in the past, QAO has raised some concerns around the completeness of that register. So what we do now is provide QAO an update. So that's in reference to that. So again, we are walking through that process of making sure that our contractual obligations or the register we maintain is up to date with all the information. So that's the update that we provided to the audit committee in the last meeting. And in relation to the overall content of the audit committee report, I think what we can do though is just to add more value to the remaining councillors who are not on the audit committee, is through the mayor, obviously at some stage provide you guys copies of the report that goes to the audit committee, so you can have a look at it and a feel for it. And generally in the past what we have done is we have had councillors who come in and sit as observers. So happy to accommodate councillors who are interested to see how the process unfolds, and also give you all reassurance that we do have highly qualified independent members on the audit committee, and also councillors. And also there is a lot of items that they go through when we meet every quarter.
Yep,
With
Mr.
your-
CEO.
If I may, through you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Singh, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong. Going to your specific comments, Mr. Deputy Mayor, enterprise risk is not just about natural disasters and so on. We're looking at our exposure to risk by virtue of fraud or embezzlement. We're looking at risks because of cyber security and a very large raft of things which are not associated with natural disasters. The other comments that you made in respect of disposals and commitments and so on are all relevant to our financial statements, and that's why it's not complete yet. We haven't hit 30th of June, so yeah, it's not that we're behind time, it's just that we're reporting on where we are relevant to that process.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other relevant fact is that Council has received 13 successive unmodified audits. That's since amalgamation, 2008 to now. No red flags were raised by internal or external auditors in relation to the work that our finance team have prepared for their examination. So you can be rest assured that it's business as usual in terms of the finance team, and the external auditors and internal auditors have supported that view. Any further questions, Councillor Barnes?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. So would somebody move? Councillor Millwood.
No, finish that and then I'll come back to you. So I've got a question, but it doesn't relate to what you were just talking about. It goes back to Barry and wanting to move a motion about the drum muster. I just wanted to put out there that lots of conversations have been had about around the drum muster contract, and that maybe a bit more conversation with our team is need to be had before we go jumping into anything too serious, because it has been spoken about on many occasions.
Thank you, Councillor Millwood. Any further comments or questions for Mr. Singh?
Mr. Mayor, just
Yeah, Mr. Singh.
I was just going to make one more comment. So, councillors, I guess just to provide a bit more clarity. So, what we are providing today is just purely the minutes from the audit committee, which is a legislative requirement for us to bring to council. But if there is an appetite from councillors to get any other form of report or any other additional information, happy to facilitate a session through a councillor information session just to give you
Good
guys
idea.
more information.
Yeah, that'll be good. Councillor Millwood.
And on that note, with the vacancy of Councillor Farinelli from that position, at some stage I'd like a recommendation for Jeff to take that up, but I don't know if we can do that, or, yeah.
Mr. CEO, you'll be dealing with that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, we'll be dealing with the replacement on the audit committee in due course. Oh,
Okay,
is there something wrong with my audio?
that's all good. Any further questions for Mr. Singh? If not, would somebody move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 4, receipt of petitions, 4.1, page 21. And Mr. Sadler will present this report. Sadler.
Good morning, Council, again. Mr. Hammond sends his apologies. He's working on the waste project at the moment, so he's asked me to present his report today. So the report that you have in front of you is a piece around Council has received a petition containing over 300 signatures in relation to the community of Tully Heads wanting to keep the Tully Heads transfer station open. The report details are there in relation to a number of the waste things that we have been talking about for some time, and the resolutions of council, and also I suppose highlighting the points around the visitation at that location and also the tonnage per year. Council obviously on the 25th of February rejected the recommendations of the officer in relation to keeping Hull Heads and Murray Upper open for 4 hours a week, as well as a review after 12 months. So I'll just land back on the recommendations to council. One was obviously to receive the petition, and secondly is obviously advise the lead petitioner that of the resolution from the 25th of February in relation to Murray Upper and Hull Heads, and that the station does keep open, and a review will be undertaken in 12 months.
Thank you, Mr. Sadler. Any questions for the officer? Mr. Councillor Pervin.
So, to my understanding, they're actually asking us to keep the Hull Heads open for 2 half days rather than 1 half day, as we had a resolution earlier this year. Is that correct, Mr. Sadler?
That's my understanding, yes.
Any further questions? Okay, if there's no further, Councillor Barnes.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we're going to be visiting this in time. If we wish to bring it forward and maybe revert back to the 2 days a week, that's up to fellow councillors, but that won't be coming up in discussion now. Just a few things we should take on board with this matter. A few things have come to the front. Drummuster is very interested in putting a container facility down there for all the lower Tully farmers. There's been no community engagement at all with that dump at all down there. It was just off the cuff, and a few things have come to the front with the numbers. The community is quite adamant that the contractors that are currently doing it never took into consideration taking the numbers correctly. They never put it on a high priority list. Other things that also, they're only allowed to go there once a day. You know, if you're trimming your trees or etc. cleaning sheds up, you need to go more than once. Yeah, I can go to the Tully dump as many times as I like in a day. I'd never really heard of that one till only recently. So I think we need community consultation, and that should be started pretty soon, because 12 months will go quick. And just remember that the council's here to serve the community, and anyone who's done any of the clean-up days, the last thing we want to do is have illegal dumping. Now, I don't think it's a lot to ask to reconsider this, and I'd like everyone to look at that petition and just to see the great support it's had. Thank you.
Any further comments, councillors?
Well, just a point of order, Mr. Mayor. I'd suggest the petition has been tabled and received, and we ought not be discussing it in this forum under our standing orders at this stage anyway. Would that be right, Mr. CEO?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the extent that the recommendation provides for advice,
Yes.
to go back to the principal petitioner, then that will be sufficient to close the matter.
All right.
Yep.
Excellent.
Okay, given that response from the CEO, no further questions for Mr. Sadler. Somebody move the recommendation, please. Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sadler. We move on to item 5.1, page 24, Cassowary Coast Regional Council Capital Report, and Mr. Smart will present this report. Mr. Smart.
Morning, councillors. This update reflects the changes in the Capital Works program since the last report, including commitments. We've expended approximately 86% of the program. As you will note, there are a couple of areas that are flagging, and I must put my hand up for the water program that has not kicked it as well as some of the other areas. Unfortunately, we have had some fairly significant resourcing issues, and that has affected our delivery program for this year. There is the capital teams are highly reliant on the plumbers, and we have a bit of a problem with retaining and recruiting plumbers at the moment, and that is affecting that delivery program. That is one of the aspects. We have a number of water main designs essentially on the books ready to go, and if the resources can't be found in a reasonable time frame, we'll have to put more work out to contract. That's the consequence of that, and that's unfortunate because there will be sort of cost implications if we're not doing it in-house, but that's the industry is in one of those cycles at the moment. There's a very strong demand for some of our trades, and that's affecting you know what's available to us really. So I'm hopeful that we can turn around that, and the next few months we'll be monitoring that situation fairly closely. The other programs are tracking along reasonably well. Again, I can speak on the sewerage program. That's reasonably well advanced. The largest components in that are the sewer relining program, and they are doing well, and largely finished by the end of this financial year. Are there any questions in relation?
Any questions for the officer? Councillor Chewy first, and then Councillor Pervin.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. I see, just have a couple of points if I may. The shade sale at the Mission Beach Pool is on the list. It's obviously taking longer than expected. I do know, I've spoke to Mr. Fisher, that it's all systems go, but if you could just give some more detail. I've had questions from community about what is happening and when it's likely to be done and why it has taken longer than we anticipated. Thank you.
Yes, the report that I've received suggests that there's been a bit of a hold-up with getting the engineering detail for the footings. Once that's received, then they can go ahead and do the footings and the erection of the steel work. And once that's in place, they can do the final measure up for the sails. The advice that I've received is the sails should be ready to be installed by third week in August. That's about as much as I can tell you on that one.
Thank you. We'll keep an eye on that and we'll have a big party, Mr. Smart, when it's up and done. So thank you for that. Just secondly, if I may indulge, we have been approached by a business operator in Innisfail regarding red bench, just regarding to the street furniture program that is listed in the capital report. It's got 2 red dots. I know it's on the agenda, on the budget list. The thought process was in support of the Red Bench, the Red Rose Foundation with Red Benches for Domestic Violence, that a couple of existing benches that are in the town, hopefully with the support of community groups, be painted red in support of the project, and then in time, when budget allows, be replaced with red benches that we've already installed in our area. If you could just put that on record and maybe take it to the right officers for some consideration, please. Thank you.
Yes, sure, Councillor. That will be noted, and there'll be some more discussion on that. I have received some advice from the officers in relation to the progress with the street furniture in Innisfail, and I believe they're finalising the Art Deco design, which is holding things up a little bit. Once that's resolved, the expected delivery is October.
Councillor Pervin, then Councillor Millwood.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Smart. Just noted in the report here, it should be noted there are a significant number of funded projects that need to be completed by 30th of June. These projects, we're only 7 days out. What projects are we running really close to not getting over the line?
I don't believe the statement there is as probably grim as it possibly suggests. Obviously, there's works for Queensland money, but most of that is operational money anyway. There's certainly in my program, I don't believe there's anything that that is particularly linked to any funding deadlines. I'd probably have to take that one on notice because I'm not aware of any specific things there.
Mr Goodman.
Through the chair, if I can just add to that, I know the officers that have been dealing with Works for Queensland projects, have any of those projects that are at risk of not going to be completed within by the 30 June. Originally the Mission Beach Pool shade sail is obviously one of those. All of those projects have been heavy consultations with the state government agency that's administering those, and when they have understood the reason for the for those delays, and primarily those have been around ensuring that we can deliver value for money projects for the community and get, I guess, more bang for the buck for the state through that funding source. They've been very good in allowing us some flexibility in those. So the advice is from a Works for Queensland perspective, there's no funding that is at risk at this stage.
All right, thanks, Mr. Goodman. Just I know Councillor Barnes is, he's always asking the question, and yeah, I don't want to see us lose money where it's been approved for us. Not a good look for us.
Thanks, Councillor Pervin. Councillor, Mr Goodman.
On that point, councillors, there is some good news on that basis. Council missed out on some funding last year on Gundi and Clifford roads because of our inability to finish the. We didn't finish the project by June 30 and didn't meet the funding deadline. In recent times, subject to final approval by the FNQ Rock board and due to other councils' inability to get their spending completed by this year's June 30, we're looking. The recommendation before the board is that Cassowary Coast Regional Council would attract $559,754 through this year's TIDS allocation for those projects. So that's a welcome addition to our finances, and I guess we catch up this year where we missed out earlier. So
that is good news. Thank you, Mr. Mr. CEO.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, a flying minute at FNQ Rock level was circulated this week, and the Mayor has responded to it, so we'll see the result of that very soon.
Yeah, thanks for that. Finished, Councillor Pervin? Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, I just wanted to know also how the Atherton Road drainage program is going to roll out and when.
I don't have the detail for that. Unfortunately, Councillor Millwood, I have to take that on notice and provide you the detail.
One further query, page 31, the Balliol Street in Carball, stage 1. I note in the calendar it says commencing next month and finishing September 21. Is that project on track?
The procurement process for that has been slightly delayed, although it would be somewhat at risk, I would have to say, Mr. Mayor, but procurement process, there is some possibility that we could have that through and done and completed within the next month, and a contractor engaged. We will have to consider our forecast completion date based on the successful tenderers works program.
Okay, thanks for that. Any further comments on that report? If not, would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 6, governance, environment and finance. Item 6.1, page 40, the interim audit report, and Ms Bradley is going to represent this report. Morning.
Ms Bradley.
Good morning, everyone. So this morning I have for you our interim audit report. So Queensland Audit Office, or QAO, has undertaken our interim audit for the 2021 financial year, which assesses the design and implementation of Council's internal controls. So in summary, no significant internal controls or deficiencies were identified during the interim audit. However, 3 current year deficiencies and 2 prior year unresolved issues have been identified. And all issues will be reviewed in detail when they come back in September for our final audit. So each year, Council, our auditors undertake an interim audit where they come in and they have a look at our internal controls and sample documentation within our finance system and IT system. So it's based on the internal control framework prior to the final audit, which is then undertaken after 30 June. So Grant Thornton looks at internal controls around our processes and systems, as well as our records and activities that our entity designs and implements and maintains to provide the audit committee and council and the community with reasonable assurance about the achievements of our organisational objectives. So a review of any prior issues is also conducted during this interim audit to assess whether they can be considered as being resolved from the previous year and identify any emerging risks that come in place. So management continuously monitor and mitigate those risks by implementing internal controls and remain vigilant against fraudulent activity. So all identified issues, together with recommendations for appropriate actions and management responses, have been included in the attachment with our interim audit. So during the audit, the external auditors are required to gain an understanding of Council's IT controls, as I mentioned. So that understanding is reconfirmed every 2 to 3 years, and they do a deep dive into the IT space. And this year was that particular year. So this detailed review was undertaken, and as a result, in the tables below on the report, there was 3 new deficiencies were identified. However, Council's internal controls are still reported as being effective. So the internal control issues raised this year were 3 minor ones, which we've discussed with our auditors. The first one relates to IT policies and documentation inconsistencies. So the recommendations to further refine our current policies we have in place, which the IT team are working towards, which should hopefully be resolved in the next audit in September. Password policy can be enhanced, was another item that they mentioned, which is further strengthening our information security policy to put some criteria around minimum password requirements, as well as unused administrator account, which referred to a user account that we had in place for the SaaS transition that hadn't been deactivated post the SaaS transition. So that's quite a simple resolution in that one. So with prior year issues, so during the interim audit, there was 3 audit issues that were resolved as part of their review, and 2 still remaining, which couldn't be tested due to the timing, which related to accuracy of our renewal assessments for our assets as well as disposals. So those 2 will be retested again in the full audit once end of financial year is finished, the revaluation data is in our asset register, etc. So financial reporting issues, there's no current financial reporting issues because our financial statements aren't yet complete, with 30 June still to come. And prior year issues related to contract commitments that Gobinder touched on briefly before with his comments around the audit committee, and we've put controls in place to minimise that risk, which once again will be retested in September when they come back. So Council will work towards mitigating those risks that are identified in that table. And in the interim report, there's some more detailed information on management's response. within those agreed timeframes. So under the local government regulation, this internal audit report must be tabled at a council meeting, which is why we're now bringing this forward to you all.
Thank you, Ms Bradley. Any questions for the officer? If not, would somebody move that the correspondence from Grant Thornton and the Queensland Audit Office in relation to Cassowary Coast Regional Council 2021 interim report to the Mayor be noted? Moved by Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. That's
Thank
a
you, Ms
mouthful,
Bradley.
isn't it?
Item 6.2, page 55, policy review, and Ms Slattery will present this report.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Okay, policy review. So the council conduct with lobbyists, developers and submitters. So we've undertaken a review of the policy that we had in place. And the review was undertaken after the Office of the Independent Assessor released a new policy template, guidelines and frequently asked questions in relation to this matter. And it enables councils to better meet the Integrity Act requirements when dealing with development applications. So the objectives of this policy is to clarify how councillors may engage with developers in the current and future interests of the local government area, in particular where there's no matter before council. It provides a framework for how councillors should engage with developers and or submitters once a matter has been prepared for lodgement or has been lodged with the council. And it also provides further guidance on when a councillor has or is likely to have a prescribed or a declarable conflict of interest in relation to a particular development application. So the policy itself, it breaks it down into the 5 stages within the development assessment process. So pre-application, pre-lodgement, post-lodgement and assessment of the development application once we're in the decision-making process, and then post-development decision and appeal process. So it gives councillors, community, some clear guidelines in terms of how to interact with council, councillors, etc. Happy to take questions.
Any questions for Ms Slattery? Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, yes. Ms Slattery, so this, I just want to make it clear that this policy is available for all persons to read, whether they be lobbyists, developers or submitters,
Yes.
so that they can go on there and actually understand exactly what we can and can't do.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it will be available on the website. So there is a policy obviously right now, but once we approve this policy, it will be updated for all to see. So yeah, it clearly outlines, you know, when councillors can interact and then how does that interaction occur. So if there is engagement requested, it needs to go through the Office of the CEO, not through to the councillors. And the Office of the CEO will coordinate that process. When councillors are meeting with developers or submitters, there needs to be a third party. It articulates who that third party needs to be. So it needs to be either the CEO, the Director of Infrastructure Services, or the manager, Planning Manager Services, or somebody appropriate to that. And then, you know, we need to make sure that we have appropriate records of those, you know, those meetings and the conversations. So the policy outlines exactly what that looks like.
Thank you, Ms Slattery. There's been a lot of community comment around councillors being available for DAs and the submitters to have a chat. I think it's important, Mr CEO, that once this is adopted today, our comms department put a piece out. So as Councillor Millwood just highlighted, the general public are fully informed about what our rights are in terms of going to meetings and talking to developers and submitters alike. So we need to keep the public fully informed. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, yes, Mr Chairman. Through you, I think that an appropriate media release can direct people to the area of the website which contains the policies and this one in particular.
Okay,
so it'll be quite clear.
Any further questions for Ms Slattery? If not, somebody move the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Baines. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms Slattery. We move on to item 6.3, page 66. the Australian Local Government Women's Association's State Conference, and Mr. Gott will present this report.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, the Australian Local Government Women's Association is a national apolitical organisation, and its charter, amongst other things, is to promote, facilitate and develop the role of women in local government throughout Australia. This conference is to be held from the 17th to, I think, the 17th to the 19th of August in Airlie Beach, and it's my recommendation, Mr. Mayor, that Council support Councillor Millwood's attendance, and that costs be covered from Councillor Millwood's allocated budgetary funds for conferences.
Any questions for the CEO? If not, will somebody move the recommendation? Councillor Chewy, Councillor Pervin, all in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 6.4, page 68, the Asia Pacific Cities Summit and Mayors Forum in Brisbane, and Mr. Gott will present this report.
Yeah, thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and with your indulgence, the conference in question, the 2021 Asia Pacific Cities Summit and Mayors Forum, will be held on the 8th to the 12th of September this year. The opportunities at that forum, other than the obvious opportunities in terms of consultation with other mayors and the sharing of innovative approaches in respect of development and governance, not only that, but it provides for provides an opportunity for the mayor to showcase local businesses, and those local businesses are then subject of digital platforming for a period of at least 6 months, and excuse me, and provides an opportunity for those businesses to achieve some recognition. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, it's my recommendation that you be authorised to attend the conference in Brisbane, Wednesday 8th through Sunday the 12th of September, and that registration, travel, accommodation and so on be allocated from the Mayor's conference allocation.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Mr. Sadler and Ms. Clark have had a brief discussion about the 10 local businesses that will be highlighted and showcased for Cassowary Coast. Mr. Sadler's attempts will be around getting the identified 10 to prepare the digital exhibition platform. We won't do it for them. So banana industry, cane industry, aquaculture, whatever other I picked out in the top 10, we'll be asking those businesses, organisations to prepare the presentation, deliver it to Mr. Sadler, and our IT people will put it together. And for the duration of the conference, those 10 businesses, industries will be highlighted to 130 cities across the Asia Pacific. So it's a great opportunity, and it's a I don't go to a lot of conferences. This is one I'm really keen to go to because it's about showcasing 10 of our businesses, industries. So would somebody move the recommendation, please? Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.5, page 81, LGAQ Annual Conference in Mackay, and Mr. Gott will present this report.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, this conference, the 125th conference, and I didn't go to the first one, Councillor Baines. The 125th conference luckily is held quite close to home in Mackay, at the Mackay Entertainment and Convention Centre. It's my recommendation, Mr. Mayor, that Council approve the attendance of yourself, Councillor Chewy, Councillor Pervin and Councillor Baines, and that the costs for early bird registration, travel and accommodation be met from each councillor's budgetary allocation for conferences.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I would also highlight that this conference will occur after Mr. Gott's departure, but I am aware that the LGAQ are extending a very kind invitation to give him his swan song at this conference. So there'll be another purpose for us attending, and also Greg Hallam, who has just stepped down as CEO, will also be given a swan song on the big stage at this conference in Mackay. So your shout, Mr. Gott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Tui.
Just following on from that, I spoke to the lady organising the women in local government through a Zoom meeting, and they are in fact going to try organise a breakfast for people that are doing that course that are also attending that conference. So it's lots of multi-levels there working together. Thank you.
Networking, yes. Good on you. Any further?
Well, I was going to say, and before you step away from that, the Australian Local Government Women's Association very kindly extend invitations to the male councillors there as well. So, and I've attended every time I've gone to a conference. So it's a great association, and it'd be nice to come and sit in the room again.
Yep. Any further questions?
Not a question. I just I would like personally, and I don't know how the other councillors feel. We haven't had a discussion that upon everybody doing their visiting their seminars and conferences, that we prepare a report and they be read out at the next available meeting. I think it's great that we go away and we learn and we network, but I think it's important that we report back to our community what we have taken away from those seminars. So I don't know if I move a motion or put forward that I just think it's a really important piece that we show what we've taken away from our seminars. Thank you.
Yeah, that's noted, and agree entirely. Any further comments or questions?
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Barnes, seconded by Councillor Irvin. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 7, Planning Services, 7.1, page 100, application for reduction in infrastructure charges. And Mr. Jones will present this report. Morning.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, Mr. Jones.
Through the Chair, councillors in receipt of a request from Mr. John Jennings and Mrs. Simone Truscott for a 100% reduction in infrastructure charges relating to a material change of use for short-term accommodation on land described as Lot 4 on SP 213774, situated at 8 Canangla Bar Close, Mission Beach. The application was approved by Council, subject to conditions, on the 25th of March 2021, with infrastructure charges for the amount of $75,444.45. The proposed development will be complementary and contribute positively to the surrounding locality. It is considered that the proposed development will support a number of businesses in the Mission Beach area. The proposed development will provide a further tourism option for the Cassowary Coast region in the form of short-term accommodation holiday stays, and is situated within close proximity to the village green. The proposed development features a high level of walkability and connectability. The development will provide a long-term economic benefit to the local Mission Beach economy and more broadly strengthen the economic resolve of the broader Cassowary Coast area. It is recommended that the request for 100% reduction in infrastructure charges be approved by Council, provided the development is completed prior to 27th of May 2024. Happy to answer any questions, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions? Councillor Tui.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And if the work is not completed by that date?
Through the Chair, Councillor Tui, the original infrastructure charges notice would then come into play and they would be charged full amount.
Thank you.
Councillor Purvis.
Yeah, I think it's a great incentive there that the council's got going. It was implemented by the previous council. I think this is something we should continually look to grow. If we can get developers on side to try and get the economy going again, this is one way that's a positive step forward.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Purvis. I just want to clarify, the policy was actually introduced by Bill Shannon and that council, but it was at 50%. John Cremastis, as Mayor, took advice from our planners and we increased it to 100%. So it's been a transition over a couple of terms and it is very successful. You're dead right. Any further questions, Councillor Baines?
Well, probably less a question, Mr. Chair, and more a comment that these sort of infrastructure charge reduction proposals come to council, and a lot of community members get the wrong idea that the council are giving this money to developers, and it's not the truth. It's about the incentive to get their business built, get it running within a time frame, and I know the time frame we're even considering reviewing that into the near future, because this is a great policy, I agree, and it does need to be reviewed as we flow along. But this perception in the community that on this occasion council is giving $75,000 to a developer is just not the truth. And the people in the community that purport this notion should really read through the policy. Another great opportunity for the people to read through one of our policies and actually understand it. Council's not giving money to developers. If they don't fit within their timeframes, they pay in full. If they do and they get it all done, they've brought a fantastic development or business to the region and help us infill some of our gaps, to help support our significant infrastructure that we have in this region. So,
thanks, Councillor Baines. The other important part of the policy addresses land banking. During our regional forum at the Tully Grandstand on Monday, Speaker of the House Curtis Pitt noted that a lot of Queensland councils, including Cassowary Coast, are challenged by land banking. Things get approved and they just sit there, they don't get delivered. Well, this encourages people, in this case, deliver it by the 27th of May 2024 and you get the incentive. So the Speaker of the House noted land banking as a major problem, and this policy does address it as well. So it's been very successful. Any further comments or questions? Somebody move the recommendation. Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 7.2, page 117, application for reduction infrastructure charges. Mr Jones.
Thank you. Through the chair. Council is in receipt of a request from Neil Beck on behalf of Madclad trading as a Jackson Family Trust for 100% reduction in the infrastructure charges relating to a material change of use for a tourist park on land described as Lot 1 RP 73338 and Lot 2 RP 743119 situated at Bruce Highway, Ellerish. The application was approved by Council subject to conditions on the 13th of May 2021 with infrastructure charges for the amount of $26,405.52. In order to be eligible for the reduction in infrastructure charges, the development must meet the eligibility criteria and provide sufficient justification. However, Council may use its discretion to grant a reduction in infrastructure charges where the development does not meet the eligibility criteria if the development can demonstrate that it will provide significant economic benefits to the Cassowary Coast region and its residents. In this case, it is noted that the infrastructure charges were only levied on the tourism park component of the development, as the motel used for the non-resident workforce accommodation has been operating prior to council planning controls within the region, and there was no increase on council's trunk infrastructure network. The applicant has proposed to allow accommodation of a maximum of 15 self-contained motorhomes to park on the allotment as part of the tourism park component of the development. Development has demonstrated that it generally complies with the eligibility criteria of the policy, with the exception of the site not being serviced by council's trunk sewerage network. However, with the proposed development being for 15 self-contained motorhomes, connection to council's trunk infrastructure network for sewerage is not required in this instance. Despite this minor non-compliance, the proposed development has demonstrated that it will provide significant economic benefit to the town of Ellerish and the wider Cassowary Coast region. The proposed development will provide an opportunity for RV travellers to discover what the town of Ellerish has to offer and support local businesses. The development also provides the region with an opportunity to promote local goods and services, its unique culture and heritage, and the remarkable natural environment that we live in. Therefore, the development is generally consistent with and provides for capital investment in accordance with the planning scheme, and is recommended that the request for 100% reduction in infrastructure charges be approved by Council, provided the development is completed prior to the 1st of June 2024. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr Jones. Any questions for the officer? Moved by Councillor Chewy, seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We move on to item 7.3, page 126, reconfiguring a lot, one lot into 21 lots at Wongaling Beach, and Mr Jones will present this report.
Thank you. Through the chair, Council is in receipt of an application for reconfiguring the lot. The application was prepared by Peter Hayward and Megan Wright, care of Gilbert Planning, for the subdivision of one lot into 21 lots on land described as Lot 996 SP 111626, situated at Pacific View Drive, Wongaling Beach. The 21 lots proposed are of various sizes and will be serviced by reticulated water, sewage, telecommunications and electricity. The lots will be accessed via road extensions to Carrington Drive and Duncully Crescent. The subject site is just over 8 hectares in area and is currently vacant and contains vegetation as well as large cleared areas. The site is also within the priority infrastructure area and is immediately adjacent to existing urban development. The application was code accessible and therefore public notification was not required. The site is mapped as containing regulated vegetation, and a portion of the site is identified as the Cassowary corridor. A technical assessment of vegetation and habitat characteristics on site has been undertaken. Proposed development minimises vegetation clearing and has been designed to take into account the Cassowary habitat corridor and environmental values. The application is generally consistent with the provisions of the regional plan and the Cassowary Coast Planning Scheme, and therefore the application for the reconfiguring of lot is recommended for approval subject to reasonable and relevant conditions. Happy to answer any questions, Council.
Thank you, Mr Jones. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Millwood.
Yes, through the chair, could you just explain a bit more why the public notification was not required?
Through the Chair. Councillor Millwood, reconfiguration of a lot under our planning scheme don't require public notification. They're only code accessible. When the impact accessible provisions come in, they're associated with material change of use. That's why we didn't have public notification on this one.
Any further questions for the officer? If not, would somebody move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Pervin, seconded by Councillor Mains. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Jones. We move on to item 7.4, page 189, delegations report, and Mr Horton will present this report. Mr Horton.
Morning, Mr Mayor. Morning, Council. How is everyone this morning?
Yeah, good, mate.
10 o'clock, good to see. Freezing. It's absolutely magnificent. Council, our stats remain pretty much the same as last month, which is pleasing. I thought we might have hit a bit of a snag, a bit of a dive, because as we know, there's a lot of building work on it, and we've only got so many. Jeff spoke about it before, about trying to get plumbers, so that's within all trades at the moment, and I support where he's at there. Overall, we're up 72 in planning on the overall approvals for the calendar year, which is nice and pleasing. They remain strong, and hopefully that continues on the back of a lot of inquiries that we keep receiving at the current time from around Australia in our customer requests, which can be seen in that component. Overall, over the 5-year approval process, we're 39 up on 2018, which was the last was 38. So over that 5-year period, we maintain where we're at that moment. We dropped a little bit in our overall approvals value. We're down to 6.4 million for the month. It was 6.8 last month, so it's not a lot of drop, but it is a little bit of a drop there. We're up 89 on our overall approvals comparison for total approvals on 2020, so we're up 89 from last year, which is nice and pleasing as well. Council, I suppose the biggest one I've looked at with all these stats and graphs is probably our searches. We know we had a lot around that Mayfair era, which was a fair bit at that time. This month we still did 39 searches, and we, overall from January we've done 194 for the region. So it's pleasing to see that there is people around looking at our area and purchasing and moving in. Wide range of variety there. And as you can see with our inspections, the building certifier is carrying out 77 for the month. That's a fair bit when you've got to travel all the way from Ubanangi to the top of Carvel Range and back through the top ranges of Palmerston and out the back of the Davison and so forth. So, and the plumbing and drainage officers are doing 44, so that's a follow-on effect from those approvals that we've done, Council. So, look, I'm happy to answer any questions you have on any matters dealing with this.
Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, this is not really a question. This is just to say that it's very nice to see that the positivity around Cassowary Coast is looking good, that people are wanting to come here and people are very interested in buying and building. So, yeah, well done.
Yeah, on that front, you mentioned Mayfair. I can share with councillors and staff a real positive story about a resident who signed a contract with Mayfair. We all know it fell over, and just recently in the last period, a couple from Sydney jumped on a plane and came up and offered them 100,000 more than Mayfair were going to pay them. So some really good stories are coming out of the sad demise of Mayfair, but residents are being rewarded now because COVID escapees are prepared to pay good money to come to a place where the borders are secure and we're basically COVID-free at the moment, COVID-free.
We'll keep it that way.
Any, at the moment. Any further comments or questions for the officer? If not, would somebody move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Millwood, seconded by Councillor Pervin. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Horton. We move on to 8, and that's general business. Any general business items, councillors? Councillor Millwood.
Yes, through the chair. I've got a couple of questions I would like to ask today. I went for a walk through the Tully Caravan Park, was it yesterday or the day before? And I just wanted to know, like, who authorised the design and placement of all the amenities and things that are in there, and how much we paid for the garden beds and landscaping, because, like, none of this was brought to the councillors, and I've only found all this out by going there and having a look myself. So there's some questions to be asked there. Also, while I was driving through town to take my son to football, I noticed there was the erection of 3 new undercover eatery spaces that were also put at various locations. And my question is, with asset rationalisation, we're sort of going against what we were talking about, minimising and bringing things into one big space. So questions to be asked there as well. And on a better note, I'd also like to say that after some nice emails to the District Director of Transport and Main Roads, a commitment has been done to finish the asphalt and resurfacing on Smith's Gap, which has commenced, and with weather permitting, hopefully both lanes will be open within the next week or so. So thank you to them for answering my pleas, and pleas of other officers as well. Thank you.
On the final one, could I get Mr. CEO to respond about the correspondence you received from the department on Smith's Gap, please?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, under instruction from the Mayor and pursuant to some of the comments that you'd made, Councillor Millwood, I was 16th of the way through drafting a letter to the district engineer, and then miraculously the letter turned up, giving us clarity as to what was happening at Smith's Gap. So, was that the question that you were asking?
That's the question I was asking.
And through you, Mr. Chairman, the other questions put by Councillor Millwood, I hope that we can take those on notice and get back to you with the answers for those.
Councillor Toohey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 points. First one for the CEO regarding the by-election coming up. I've had people ask me why second place person didn't just step up and become the new councillor, why there in fact has to be a by-election. Thank you.
Well, that's thank you, and through you, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question, Councillor Chewy. The quadrennium, the 4-year term, is split into 3 parts. The first year is the first part, the second 2 years, the second part, and obviously the final year, the last part. During the first part of the term, the runner-up, as it were, is appointed, if that person agrees to it, to the position. In the middle part, which is where we are, then a by-election must be called by law. Yeah. Oh, and in the final part, the council has the opportunity to leave the position vacant.
Thank you, Mr. Gott. Could I ask Mr. Sadler to come to the table, please?
Mr. Sadler.
Morning, Council.
Welcome back.
Mr. Sadler, I'd like to discuss our policy regarding our in-kind support. There's been a considerable amount of angst and confusion within the community. I'm concerned that our generous, though limited, volunteers will withdraw their efforts and the community will suffer. I'm sorry that I didn't bring this to the table at the original meeting, but I'm hoping that you will be able to provide some clarity by letting community know what we are able to provide and who is able to assist them. Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Chewy, for your question. I suppose, as we have discussed with council on a number of occasions, that we do have a grants policy and a grants policy guideline, and that has been in place since 2019. So it's in relation to, I suppose, making sure that our processes are right, our governance is right, and also our accounting in relation to how we administer and support community events and community groups in relation to sponsorship, grants, donations and in-kind support. The concern around council's, I suppose, withdrawing from supporting the community is not correct. The guideline has been there and has the policy been there since 2019, and we will continue to do that. From a community groups perspective, all the policies and procedures and how to go about getting those grants and in-kind support is on our webpage. And I suppose with some of the changes recently from a budgeting perspective for fees and charges in relation to particularly mobile toilets, for example, there has been some correspondence sent out to all the community groups and event groups that we are aware of in relation to some of those changes. So it's also about making sure that council doesn't take away potential work from local businesses in that regard. We as council will continue to acknowledge and support those events that have had bookings prior to the end of financial year, and we'll honour those commitments obviously. But it's also about process, and so it's in relation to following that process and seeking in-kind support in a formal way as opposed to an informal way which has been occurring in the past. And it's also us as officers adhering to council's policy. In that correspondence that was sent out to the community groups, that we are reviewing that policy and guidelines, and that's being done through the Community Relations and Services Group and our Community Development Officer in relation to how we might do that and might change that to continue to support those events. And that's the target for that is September this coming year. So I suppose in addition to that, the policy and the grants do policy and grant guideline procedure does outline the financial commitments that council will make to those events, and we'll continue to look at that and review those figures within budget.
Councillor Millwood.
So through the chair, Mr. Sadler, so just in layman's terms, we are still providing in-kind support, but we are just doing it in a new fashion. And who would be the contact person for general public to get into contact with to find out the new process?
So first of all, in relation to making an application, our customer service team are more than happy to help anyone who rings in or comes into our service centres. And from that, the community service and relations team will help with that, and our community development officer will help as part of that process.
Yep. So through the chair, so what should they actually be asking for, just so they don't ask for the wrong thing?
Yep. So there's. Thank you very much for your question, councillor. Through the chair, on the webpage it does highlight how to go about doing those applications and step-by-step piece. And if they do require assistance, it does highlight who to contact in relation to the Community Relations and Services team.
Thank you,
Councillor
Councillor
Cherry.
Millwood and Mr. Sadler. So could I ask through the Mayor that perhaps this is another piece that the comms team might work on to make it clearer, because I genuinely believe that there is a lot of confusion and lack of understanding on how the process works. So perhaps the comms team with your team could work together to make it a better piece for the community to understand. Thank you.
Mr. CEO, you've taken that on board?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, I see our friend and colleague, Ms. Slattery's nodding her head, so she's obviously taken a note of that.
Just to supplement Mr. Sadler's response, traditional events like Anzac Day will still attract marquees, etc. Cemeteries where we have marquees will continue to be offered to the community. So none of that in-kind support has been withdrawn. It's just streamlining where we compete with local businesses. That's all we've done in terms of our policy direction. But if the message hasn't got out clear, I take Councillor Chewy's point. Adam, Mr. Sadler and others will work with Ms. Slattery and make sure we get a comms piece out on that front. Okay, any further general business? Councillor Pervin.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I've been approached by the committees at the Castor Park Marillion. Since the movement of the Saturday soccer from the Silkwood Soccer Grounds to Castor Park, the usage has heavily increased. Parking has become an issue, but especially the bogginess in the weather that we've got. The committee's asked me to put this forward to council for some consideration to get some sort of rock to be laid on the ground there just to help. I mean, as it is on a Saturday afternoon, you go there now, the parking's very difficult, but when it's wet, half those places you can't park in. So the committee's just come forward for just kind of like a quick fix, if they can get some sort of rock put down and maybe a little bit of drainage work just to help the water run away. If you could take that on notice, thanks, Mr. CEO.
Mr. CEO.
Yes, through Mr. Chairman, yeah, that'll be referred to.
That could be a future
engineering.
CIS where we'll have a discussion about it, once our staff have had time to think about it and bring something back to us.
Could there not be a grant available for such things?
Could be, for sure.
A couple more things. Another query I've had is the footpath on Fitzgerald Esplanade in Innisfail, where we've been doing some footpath works. A couple of residents have asked me, is there any chance we could get the speed limit changed to a 20-kilometre-hour zone while the works are happening? Just they said that in front of the hospital, it's a 20-kilometre zone there where we're doing some footpath work. But they said it's very difficult for the old people coming out of the RSL and the cafe there, crossing the road, and you've got to be right on the road just as the footpath work's happening. If we could look at changing the speed limit to a 20-kilometre-hour zone in the short term.
Through the chair, thanks, Councillor Pervin. What I'll do is I'll ask the team to review the traffic management plan in relation to that space. There is an MUTCD, a state guideline in relation to how we implement traffic management or temporary traffic work. So we'll review that and see whether that's possible.
Thank you, Mr. Sadler. You happy with that?
Yeah, Mr. Sadler, while you're there, how's that project going for time-wise? When do we look for completion? Is it on time?
Through the chair, can I take that on notice, Councillor Pervin? I haven't got that information at hand right now. Happy to come back to you at a later date once I have that information.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Councillor Pervin.
Yeah, my last piece for general business, Mr. Mayor, covers a couple of topics. Firstly, our roadside vending locations. We need to have a CIS on them. They need to be identified, spoken about with councillors to increase more various locations within our whole region and the number of different roadside locations. If I could ask this to be brought forward for a CIS just for all councillors to have some input in where we move forward with that.
If I may, through Mr. Chairman, that's already being worked on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll look forward to seeing that soon. One more question. Waller's Fish and Chips van. Mr. CEO, could we get an overview of the current situation with it, how council is dealing with it, and what path we're going down to negotiate an outcome with the owners? I myself am in support of Waller's to remain. I would like the council to be kept updated about the progress, where we're at, and how things are progressing and negotiations with the current owners.
Yeah, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, the business that you're referring to, Waller's Fish and Chips, is situated on state reserve with council vested as trustee. Staff are working with the proprietor, have been working with the proprietor and will continue to work with the proprietor to provide an outcome consistent with council's local laws, with state legislation, with council's local laws, policies and guidelines. So the nature of those negotiations is something which is alive as we speak.
Just the general public perceive that we are currently kicking Waller's Fish and Chips out of where they are.
Yeah,
Can this be clarified that this is not the case?
Chairman, we are not kicking Waller's Fish and Chips out of where they are. We're working with the proprietor to try to provide a solution.
All right, thanks, Mr. CEO. If you can just keep us up to date with how things are progressing, because there's a lot of community feedback happening on this one as we speak.
On that front, Mr. CEO, do you think comms should put a piece out because I was asked to go on 4KZ this week to talk about the matter, I declined because I was aware that it's an operational matter. Staff are currently in negotiations with Miss Wallace and her legal advisor, and just to diffuse the whole thing, maybe a comms piece around negotiations are current.
Yeah, I don't think that's inappropriate, Mr. Chairman. However, I think what's very much in the public interest will be the outcome of our negotiations. The result is probably more important than the fact that we're trying to get to a result.
Okay. Yeah. Any, Councillor Pervin, you have a
Yeah, can we talk about what sort of outcomes are being put to Ms Wallace in relation to that? Is it roadside food vending? What is it, Mr CEO?
Generally speaking, we're talking, well, our guidelines provide for roadside food vending. There's also food hygiene regulations, food handling regulations, and a raft of other issues that are under discussion. Mr. Goodman, your team is, no, Mr. Sadler, your team is largely involved in this, and it's probably premature to be talking about the negotiation whilst it's alive. So I'd be only too pleased to come back to council with an outcome report, but the exact state of the negotiations is very much in the order of a legal issue. The proprietor has representation, and we probably shouldn't be preempting what the outcome will be before we've got an agreement and a recommendation. Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I'm sorry, did you have anything to add or correct, Mr. Directors, Messier Directors?
Certainly not to correct Mr. CEO through the chair. I guess the process, there is a process in place. It comes about because of an imminent expiry of an existing lease, and looking to, with consistency, how we do other similar type of arrangements throughout the region. A process will be available to the providers there to transition from the lease that they currently have, which is about to expire, and transition through to a roadside vending process. So that's the process that we're working through.
Councillor Millwood.
Yes, through the chair. Can you just clarify that if somebody applies for a roadside vendor, is it part of the vendor agreement that they must pack up and move every day? Is that part of what a roadside vendor is, or are they allowed to stay there on a time basis? I'm not sure. I don't know what that actually means.
So through the chair, councillors, as we've talked about previously, that we do have a guideline, and as part of the last update at our CIS that we had with the regulatory services team, that we are reviewing that as we speak. So there is that includes locations as well, as Councillor Pervin highlighted earlier on this morning. Can I take that question on notice? And I know that as the CEO highlighted, that the regulatory services team are coming back to council with some of those modifications and changes that council had asked and requested. So that I'm not sure what date that has been set for, but when that time comes, we will go through those issues.
Yeah, and if I may, I'm sorry, if I may, through you, Mr. Chairman, without preempting anything, the area of land that we're speaking about is in fact a car park. So that's possibly germane to where those negotiations might go.
Any further comments, councillors, around that issue? Okay. Any further gentlemen? Councillor Millwood.
Through the chair, yeah. I just in our asset rationalisation, we have got some talk around the Igloo and Tully. Is it right to say that we've been in conversation with some of those user groups, and it has been put to them to provide some principles and financials associated with the ongoing use of the facility, but nobody's actually come back and given us any verification on where they want to go with this. Is that right?
Through the chair, it's not quite right, Councillor Millwood. Some user groups there have been very clear about where they would like to proceed. However, that doesn't align with what has been put to us, hasn't aligned with the principles that were adopted for community use of assets in December of 2020. We have advised my officers have provided information to a number of user groups down there that have indicated that they would like to enter into a lease with us or a long-term agreement with us for exclusive rights to the igloo at the Tully Showgrounds, and we've advised of the order of costs that we would be that council is incurring, and I have to acknowledge that the greatest proportion of those costs are associated with depreciation, which are not visible costs to members of the community, and it is correct though that we haven't had a group that has indicated that they have the capacity or the intent to cover those sort of depreciation costs on ongoing insurance. There is the minor ongoing operations, maintenance, those sort of costs. I hope that clarifies, answers the question.
Any for Councillor Barnes?
Good, thank you very much. I'm pleased Mr. Goodman was talking about that, because this is where I differ with Mr. Goodman's policy there. He used a word like what cost council's incurring, like we're getting bogged down in all this asset rationalisation. I'd like to see a review done of all council properties currently being used by the non-profit organisations, mainly outgoing costs, with one column reading depreciation. Now, I don't think our non-profit organisations in our shire should be made to pay for depreciation. I can't see why we should be charging them to pay depreciation when eventually we're going to knock that building down. Now, I know the state government says we've got to do it, so let's do it. So pull money from Peter to give to Paul, put it in a column, get your ongoing costs, charge the community all the outgoing costs, because I know you just used the word, council's outgoing costs. That's the rent we charge. When we knock that building down in X amount of years' time, shift it from Peter and give it back to Paul, and all's happy. That's my opinion of that. Dave?
Mr. Goodman.
Me too. I'm totally confused.
Well, thank you, Councillor Chewy, because I'm a little confused as well. I would say none of this is my policy, Councillor Barnes. Any policies here are council's policies, not my policy. I'm not implementing anything of my own volition here. And costs, in my view, though, costs are costs, and what is reflected in what council is required to fund to balance their budget within the framework that we work in includes depreciation. I have my own personal view. I certainly understand your own personal view on that, Councillor Barnes, but I think that's certainly, I'll say my views on the relevance of depreciation on things like the igloo is irrelevant, because we've got to work within the system that there is. I'm happy to work with my team to provide you a report to identify the amount of depreciation on individual assets that would not be that are used by community groups. That wouldn't be a particularly onerous piece of work, and happy to do that. I'm sure I've missed some points in your statement there, Councillor Barnes, but happy to get a follow-up question if required.
Good, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I might get him to re-watch it this afternoon. He'll pick it up, the Peter and the Paul bit, Yeah. So it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't want to charge user groups for depreciation that we're not gonna rebuild. You know, it's not rocket science, I can't figure it out. While I'm here, we're getting a major problem in certain parts of our area, and I've said it once, I'll say it again about the crocodiles. We've got kids getting on a bus now at Vipiana Drive, 71, 73, right beside where the crocodile's laying in the swamp. The government's been notified, they went there and put 2 little signs. Nothing was done, no trap was placed. It's only a matter of time. I talked to plenty of aircraft and helicopter pilots. They said they're getting out of hand. I know that we've had government bodies come here in the Johnson, in the Hull, in the Tully doing numbers. Well, they come here in summer. Well, you know, you don't see many. If you're up the creeks like me, you don't see many. You come now. Come now in winter and I can take you up the Hull and I'll show you 4 metre crocs sunning on a sandbar, all trying to get warm. I hope they're listening to this because you're going to get wrong numbers. You come in the wrong time of the year, you're not going to get the right numbers. Now's the time they should be here. And if they had to get the correct numbers, I think they'd put it a long way up the list on their priorities. Also, while I'm here yesterday, and this is only my opinion, not council, and it's an operational matter. Yesterday we stopped all the workers. Well, I didn't, but one of the officers, and we took them to the showgrounds and had a big chat on operational matters. Well, that's all good and well, but as an outsider, we've got potholes a foot deep, and we've got drainage problems, and we've got ideal, sunny, cool working conditions now. We have stopped graders, we stopped trucks, we've got banana trucks going through holes, smashing suspensions, we've got bin tractors, got to slow right down. This is when we should be working overtime with the graders and the trucks and try and bring our roads up to a great standard for safety, and we're standing them all down. I agree with these meetings, they're great. I didn't say we shouldn't have them, but let's have them in the wet season when we're all sitting around the shed holding hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. I might get Mr Saddle to answer the crocodile one before we go to Councillor Millwood.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Look, Deputy Mayor, as recent as Monday, the Mayor and I and the CEO had the opportunity to talk to the State Environment Minister, and so we, on our list of things to talk to her about was crocodile management. And also, as highlighted previously, we have been talking to the regional manager in relation to crocodiles and looking for some commitment from the state in relation to reviewing their state crocodile management plan for our region. I'll be working with Councillor Baines on doing the next steps of that very soon, and have got some level of commitment, particularly from the regional manager, to have further conversations down that path.
Thanks, Mr Sadler. And in relation to summer versus winter, and they should be on the ground now, I can guarantee you they are on the ground now, because when we're at the Barramundi farm, the word predator was mentioned in terms of birds. I asked about the other predator that dominates our region, and they told us that the department removed a 2.5 metre croc from that Barra farm at Martyville only a fortnight ago. And guess how many crocs are still remaining at that Barra farm? 21. So the department are doing the count. They're on the ground doing the work you've asked for, and they're doing it at the right time of the year. So it's definitely happening. Mr CEO.
Through you, Mr Chairman, if I could just go back to the dreadful D word, depreciation, for a moment. And in response to one of your questions, Mr Deputy Mayor, depreciation occurs through to the end of life of an asset. It must be acquitted, it must be paid for by somebody. Council's existing policy provides that the users of the asset will pay for that depreciation. So the question is, if not the users, then who? So Council's current policy provides that it's the users who are covering the depreciation. And through you, Mr Chairman, I wonder, before Councillor Moore, did you want to add anything further to that, Councillor?
Well,
Mr.
that
Seymour?
was, I was just going to come in and say that through the chair, that maybe the word depreciation and what it means and how it's done needs to be explained to people in full, because people don't understand what the depreciation is. And if the user groups aren't going to pay the depreciation through their rent and their user agreements, then are all these people happy for this extra cost to go on their rates? Because where else is it going to go? We don't have a bucket of gold to just pull it out of thin air. It's got to be paid at the end of the day. So, yeah, I don't know. I think maybe a bit more of an explanation of how the depreciation is found, and maybe that will put people's minds at a bit more at ease about what depreciation actually is.
Thanks, Councillor Millwood. Any further comment, Mr. CEO?
No, Mr. Singh's indicating that he doesn't want to add to my comments, but in respect of depreciation generally, I think everybody in the room is aware that if you run a business that relies upon the use of, let's say, a car, and you don't take account of the amortisation, the depreciation, the fact that that car has a limited life, then you end up broke. You go down the tubes. If your business doesn't provide for the replacement of that car when it's no longer useful to you, then you have just sold the farm. You've just gone broke. So that it's. I know that depreciation is more complex than that, but that's a reasonable analogy.
Any further general business?
Yeah,
Councillor
Mr. Mayor,
Barnes.
you're using the word replacing the car. I'm saying you're not going to replace this car. You understand?
Yeah, I do.
You're not comparing apples with apples here.
Yeah, well, through you, Mr. Chairman, I do understand, but you still need to depreciate until the end of the useful life of the asset. That's the law.
Well, we're not the users of the showgrounds aren't paying the depreciation of the grandstand. That's got to be $600 grand a year.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, that's a community facility that's used for all sorts of things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Singh, I think, might want to say a bit about depreciation.
Yeah, through the chair, councillors, I think at the end of the day, if we own an asset and we are using it, and as long as the asset is providing us a service, the asset will have to be depreciated. And I think at the end of the day, if it's the assets that's linked to a particular service, and if that particular service can fund the asset's depreciation, then we fund it. So a good example would be, for example, water. All the water infrastructure is being funded out of water, and water pays for it. But if there are assets, particularly when you start going into community-based assets, we acknowledge the fact that there are a number of assets, and there's a lot of assets that we own, and not every user group or community group is probably in a position to pay for depreciation for those assets. I think it will come back to how does council want to fund that depreciation, which is what James was referring to before. And if council does take a policy position where it goes, no, we don't want the user group to pay for the depreciation, but we only recoup as a fee only partial depreciation, only a partial proportion of that revenues or expenditure. So I think it will revert back to then who pays for the rest. So somebody has to pay for it. So it either goes to your general rates, or you increase your fees and charges, or you look for an alternative revenue stream. Unless council changes its asset policy, I think one of the things that is where we are working towards is, if when we talk about asset rationalization, we are working through the process of identifying assets that are either underutilized, or if there is a different way of delivering those services through different assets, then potentially trying to rationalize those and manage those going forward. So in saying that, though, if there are assets that we've identified are assets that council is not going to replace or renew, and a good example would be, say, the Perry Harvey Jetty, where council had a resolution it's not going to replace or replace the asset when it comes to the end of the life. We still have to depreciate the asset to the end of the life. We might not maintain it, or we might not have to renew it going forward, but we still have to depreciate. But what we do, though, is we are able to change the methodology of depreciation of that asset. So again, it gets a bit more complex, and the depreciation methodology that is available can change. But this is where there is a lot of work that is required, where individual assets needs to be identified, and we have to identify what council's appetite is going forward. So that's why it's not an easy subject to discuss. But at the end of the day, we do own around $1.8 billion worth of assets, and our depreciation is going up to be around $28.3 million going forward. So I think this is where, again, renewal has to be funded, and somebody has to pay for renewal. Otherwise, we run the challenge of running deficit budgets, which is something that we want to avoid, because council wants to be sustainable going forward. So hopefully that does help with the conversation.
Thanks, Govinda. Mr. Singh. Yeah, look, at the end of the day, our biggest financial risk is our huge asset base, and with that comes depreciation. And as Mr Singh just highlighted, this year's budget, $28.6 million. I can remember doing budgets 15 years ago, and depreciation hardly got a mention, but it's crept up on us. And when the amalgamation took place, two shires come together, two lots of assets were merged into one, and where their councillors have the strategic responsibility to manage it. And we've got to do it with advice from our financial team and Queensland Treasury, who in 2015 said, where you are right now, it's not sustainable. And we didn't do anything about it because we were recovering from Lowry and Yarzy. But in this term, we've got oxygen, and we all went in with a mandate to do something about the asset base. And I'm not going to diminish from that task over the 4 years at all. Any further general business?
Just on that note, with the Queensland Treasury, I did speak to a couple of people from the Queensland Treasury at my latest seminar that I went to on waste, and they are very happy with the way we're going with our asset rationalisation, and said that we are doing a very good job and puts us in a very good financial position. So we are on the right track, even though some people don't understand how that pans out in the long run. But it's like if you go to town every week and you're going to buy a new shirt and a new pair of pants and a new pair of shoes, eventually you've got to throw the old ones out. So,
good analogy.
Sorry.
Good analogy, yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Millwood. Any further general business? Councillor Chewy.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, as we know, it's nearly showtime, and those that know me well know how much I love the Tully Show. So I've been going around to community and handing out the show schedule, and I challenge everybody in the room to put an exhibit into the Tully Show. There's a cake making section for gentlemen and photography and things like that, so that'll be a bit of fun. And also, just on a more serious note, the committee work very hard. It's a very small committee, but they work very hard to make a huge event happen for our community. So if anybody would like to come on board and be part of that committee, I'm sure they'd welcome you. There is a working bee at the showgrounds on Sunday to try and tidy things up and get things ready for the show, so I'm sure they would welcome more faces. And yeah, it's a great event, and one that I'm very proud to be part of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chewy. Councillor Millwood.
Further to Trudy's spiel on the show, the Tully Show Society is looking to find some more volunteers to help along with the Queensland COVID app at the gate. So if you want to spare to put a few hours in, then get in contact with the girls at the Tully Show Society, and I'm sure they'd be happy to give you a bit of a roster. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Millwood. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for everyone's indulgence. I'm renowned for being an absolutely patient man, and in respect of not behaving as my loquacious self today, I would like to present a general business item. So with the Mayor's kind indulgence and permission, I was represented at the Cassowary Awards on the 19th of June that was held up at the Tanks Arts Centre in Cairns. Cassowary Coast Regional Council are proud supporters of the awards. It's the 19th awards this year, I believe it was. The amazing thing to inform all the councillors in the community was that we had 5 community members or groups nominated in various sections of the 10 awards. So there was 52 nominations in total out of the 10 awards, and the Cassowary Coast region put up 10% of the nominations in those. So I'd like to do a shout out to the Gerringong Rangers, the female rangers in particular, who were nominated in a couple of awards. Mission Beach Wildcare, they were nominated in an award. Ingrid Marker, I believe Ingrid was nominated in 4 awards. And Laurie Trott, ex-employee of council, used to work in our comms department. I believe Laurie was also nominated in 4 sections. Laurie got a finalist in a couple. But probably the big story of the night was that the Mission Beach State School won the Young Cassowary Award for the entire Wet Tropics region. And I'd just like to, yeah, please. And to all the nominees and finalists, it was fantastic to see. There is a challenge piece, Mr. Mayor. There's a local government and industry award, and as proud supporters, I'm going to throw a challenge out to our crew, because the team that won it this year was from the Tablelands Regional Council. So I think we've got 12 months to work towards, and I'll personally nominate some of the team into the awards, because I think one, it's the Cassowary is our emblem and our namesake, and I know our team already does amazing work towards it, and probably they deserve the recognition that we can take away from the Tablelands Regional Council. So that was just a good news piece, Mr. Mayor. Another couple of pieces. Councillor Pervin, Councillor Chewy and I attended the Radiant Life College on Monday. They had their NAIDOC celebration probably a couple of weeks early, but the background story to that was they had All Saints Anglican College. They had their rugby union team are up doing a bus tour, and they've spent a week over at Radiant Life, and they're developing quite a partnership with the Radiant Life School. It was great to see these young rugby union players there and being all very supportive. It was a wonderfully inclusive day. We got to do a tour of the new project that's completed now over at Radiant Life School. And it was just, I know I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure I can say that Councillor Chewy and Councillor Pervin really enjoyed the day. So it was a great day. And one last one, Councillor Chewy and I went down to the Jumbin community last week. I had 2 opportunities to visit the Murray Falls in a week, which was fantastic. The Jumbin community are trying to position themselves as the first eco-village, Indigenous eco-village within the country, which I think is a great aspiration. And just having some councillors there talking to them and being supportive of the project, they were very encouraged, and they'd like to see more of us as council, but they're very encouraged that we're being supportive. So we will try and arrange a yarning circle down at the park around a fire, and get all the councillors down to attend and meet with their board. Yes, that's right. It's probably very important, Mr. Mayor. There was 3 levels of government there: the Australian government, the state government, and local government. The best one, of course.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor
Thank you, with your indulgence, Mr. Mayor.
This item has come to general business because of the time frame. There's a Coastal Leaders Forum in Gladstone on the 8th and 9th of July. Hence, we need to make a decision today, one way or the other. Conversations that will occur at the forum: advocacy priorities and issues for coastal councils, identification of gaps and alignment with coastal council advocacy priorities and issues, what support and assistance do Queensland coastal councils need, federal government issues, trade, tourism, investment, federal government again, financial sustainability, housing and insurance, state government, infrastructure, planning, economic development and governance, state government again, environmental protection, climate change and the Great Barrier Reef. Registration to attend is free of charge. I therefore move the following motion: that Councillor Jeff Baines be nominated as the proxy for the Mayor to attend the Coastal Leaders Forum in Gladstone from Thursday the 8th to Friday the 9th of July 2021, and the cost for travel and accommodation be paid from the councillors' budgeted funds for conferences. I move that motion. Will somebody second it? Seconded by Councillor Millwood. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Do you want to go?
It would be my absolute honour to attend on behalf of the Mayor and our regional council.
I just want to mention the Tully's Past Unlocked exhibition in 1 hour's time. I did an interview on ABC this morning with Michael Clark, and he asked me to give a bit of background, so I'll repeat it now. Late in 2019, a community survey was conducted regarding the rejuvenation of the Tully Library and its local history collection. Overwhelmingly, it indicated that the community was very local history oriented and wanted more access to the collection. With the Strategic Priorities Grant, the library was able to buy a large interactive display table and 2 glass display pods. The display table now features a range of local history storylines, such as the history of the banana industry and the arrival of the cane cutters. The exhibition is titled Unlocking Tully's Past and is located in Dorothy Jones Library in Tully. The interactive showcase is dedicated to sharing the unique history of Tully and its surrounding region, some of which has never been on display in public. And the final thing is, over time, there will be an opportunity to include more themes, such as the history of the timber industry, the early pioneers, the history of the cattle in the area, and the origin of street names, and much more. So that a number of us are attending that at 12 o'clock.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, also in keeping with the history part, my father came over from Lithuania and was a cane cutter in 48, and so I took some of my photos into the Marillion Sugar History Museum, and they scanned and logged them as well. So once again, if young people are out there wondering what to do with parents and grandparents' stuff, it's really important to keep it. So take it to the libraries, take it to the Sugar Museum in Marillion, and log it as part of our history, because it's just such an important thing that we don't want to lose it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turi. We all know there's been a hot debate in our community over the last period about RV owners and do they spend locally. So the only way to measure that was to install a receipt box at Hadrow Park. It was installed by the men's shed. They built it, and caretaker installed it, and I was contacted yesterday. They're the receipts that have been collected in 2 weeks, and James got one of our staff to tally it up yesterday, $5,597 in a fortnight. Now, that doesn't include brothers who pick them up and take them down for meals. That doesn't include pizzas that are being delivered to the RV owners, and not every participant puts their dockets in the box, but the people that did it for 14 days, there's the evidence, and the tally is $5,597. So there's the evidence. The naysayers who believe that they do nothing for our local economy, well, there's a true measure. Are there any more general business items? All right, we will then move to a confidential section, which is 9.1, page 213, the Register of Pre-Qualified Suppliers for Supply of Quarry Material. And we need now to close the meeting to the public. Somebody moved that we close the meeting to the public. Councillor Baines, seconded by Councillor Barnes. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, councillors, would somebody move that we reopen the meeting to the public, please? Moved by councillor Millwood, seconded by councillor Dewey. All in favour? It's carried unanimously. Over to Ms Perini to present the report 9.1 on page 213, the register of pre-qualified suppliers for the supply of quarry material.
Thank you. So this report is for the acceptance of a register of pre-qualified suppliers for the supply of quarry materials. Effectively, quarry material is required by council to conduct construction, heavy maintenance of unsealed roads and the delivery of emergent works funded by external funding. So the recommendation for this report is that council accept the register of pre-qualified suppliers listed within this report for the supply of quarry materials within the Cassowary Coast local government area for the period of the register of pre-qualified supplier contractual arrangement. And delegates authority to the Chief Executive Officer in accordance with the Local Government Act to enter into contract. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the officer? If not, would somebody move the recommendation? Moved by councillor Dewey, seconded by councillor Pervin. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms Perini. I declare the meeting closed at 11:15.